Good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone. Howdy doody. Howdy people in the future and howdy everyone in the chat. Jill in the chat, we got Dylan there. Is that a 9/11 joke? I don't know. Howdy Tyler, howdy Kimberly. Hey, Bob's here. And we are back with the final chapters. My boys, the final chapters of Beelzebub, well, chapter of Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson. Let's see if we can get through some of these pages today. I believe last week we got up to this point here. He started talking about these 4 different types of personalities, or they were like 4 different layerings, and it was a bit... Oh, hello, good night, friend, says Ethan. Hello, Ethan. It was a bit esoteric, if I don't say so myself. It seemed like these aren't 4 different personalities, that they're different layers of personalities, and it seemed like the first one was kind of imposed from the exterior, so opinions from other people gets layered into you, and then there's things that you derive from your own senses, and then there's the motor reflex reciprocal affecting manifestations proceeding in it. Like, what? I assume that's like when you interact then with something with your body, like someone can tell. The first layer is like someone can tell you about a plant. The second layer is you see a plant, and then the third layer is like you feel and you smell the plant. And it's like, I'm going like, you know, with levels of knowledge here. So the person who just kind of lives off the first layer of personality ain't that much. The second one has got a little bit more, and the third one's got something, but it's then the fourth one. He actually has kind of crystallized himself in his centers, and even though he's unbalanced, he kind of has an... Oh, well, there's an I maybe present, but it's not... He doesn't own it. So... let's jump right into it. Only then can the I which should be in man be his own I. Knowledge. According to the already indicated seriously instituted experimental investigations carried on over many years, or even according merely to the sane, impartial reflection of even every contemporary man. There's a guy revving his car driving by. Bruh. I swear he did that like 3 in the morning a couple of days ago. I'm not sure if you could all hear that. Sane and impartial reflection of even every contemporary man, the common presence of every man, particularly of one in whom, for some reason or another, there arises, so to say, the pretension to be not just an ordinary average man, but what is called one of the intelligentsia. Ah, yes. In the... nowadays, if you want to be one of the intelligentsia, all you do is start a YouTube channel. Pfft. In the genuine sense of the word, must inevitably consist not only of all the said 4 fully determined distinct personalities, but each of them must of necessity be exactly correspondingly developed to ensure that in his general manifestations during the period of his responsible existence, all the separate parts should harmonize with each other. So even though it sounds like layers, it almost sounds like people, these layers are almost individuals even in and of themselves. So we as humans are not one thing, we're a multiplicity, and we're a bit janky at that. We're not a multiplicity that's unified, a multiple unity, we're a multiple disunity. That's why it's hard to like silence your mind or focus on one thing. You try to focus on one thing and then something in you is like, but what about the other thing? What about the things we haven't done? What about those things that we did before? What about Netflix? You know, all those kind of things. So yes, so we have multiple personalities. We are a multiplicity. For a comprehensive and visible clarification, we. Exactly. There is no I in we. For a comprehensive and visible clarification to oneself of the varied sources of the arising and the varied qualities of the manifested personalities in the general organization of man, and also of the difference between what is called that I which should be in the common presence of a man without quotation marks. So there's man, and then there's a real man. That is a real man. Or is the quotation marks man the real one anyway? Either or. And as it can be expressed, the pseudo-I, which people today mistake for it. An analogy can be very well made. So the whole thing is we are a multiplicity. Hey, Terrific King, thank you for the $10. So we are a multiplicity, but we feel like one thing. You know, I have a single body and I have this name, Richard. And so I assume I'm one thing, but I'm actually a bit of a multiplicity. And we kind of deceive ourselves thinking we have one eye, but there's actually kind of multiple eyes that switch and change out with each other. Everybody's a little bit disassociative. You know, maybe people who are like schizophrenic or have multiple personality disorders, they're like more bifurcated. There's maybe like, instead of just 4 personalities, they have 100 or 1,000 or something. But most people, even though they're not a unity, they maybe only have a couple of personalities. When really we should just have one. A single eye. A single eye that perhaps wears different masks, but we got to act, that knows how to act in different situations, but nonetheless, it's a single eye. That is a real man, and as it can be expressed, the pseudo-I, which today mistake for it, analogy can be very well made. Though this analogy, as is said, has been, what is the analogy? Tell us, Gurdjieff. Has been worn threadbare by contemporary what are called spiritualists, occultists, theosophists. I assume he's saying theosophist in this manner. I can imagine him saying that. Theosophists. And other specialists in catching fish in muddy waters. That is a great analogy there. These people who, you know, who think they know what they're about, occultists and spiritualists, they're just good at catching fish in muddy waters. You know, that's a pairing of the phrase, they muddy the waters to see deep, and every now and then they catch a fish, and they say something that is actually deep, that is actually profound. It's like they catch a fish in muddy waters. They muddy the waters to seem deep. They're actually shallow, but every now and then they produce a fish, and it gives this deception that, you know, they have access to the whole ocean, but it's just an extra bit of deception. Even though the fish may sustain you for a little while, they're still a false guru. That's a very interesting thing. Another guy's in the chat. Howdy, another guy. Little off topic, another guy. Finally finished Lord of Mysteries, by the way. And then you know what's crazy, another guy? The site I was using, the very next day, like I went to bed and I woke up and I went to go back to reading. Beginning After the End, and the site, I used the same site to read Lord of Mysteries that I used to read Beginning After. I just stopped reading Beginning After and read Lord of Mysteries. The site got taken down. It got completely destroyed by the feds. They're like, nah, sorry. And it's like, there's just a message that's like, it's over, guys. Join our Discord. And I was like, oh, shit. So I finished Lord of Mysteries, and then the day after, the site got taken down, bruh. Whew. Thank God I speed read it. Kimberly, did you just call out the New Age again? Yes. Yes, I did, Kimberly. Did I read it in light novel? Yes, I did. And then I went to another one, and another site, because I went to my backup site, and that one was also taken down. And I'm like, oh god, they're coming for us. Have you finished it? So if you rate it from out of 10, what is the best volume? I mean, overall, sorry guys to just go off on topic here. Lord of Mysteries is 10 out of 10 compared to other light novels, because Lord of Mysteries is fundamentally a novel that's presented as a light novel. So when you compare it to light novels, it just completely dominates all the other light novels. It's got everything. Howdy, Coca. What's the favorite volume? So it's hard because, like, it's a toss-up between, like, 2 and 3, because the one where he's a detective is super fun, but I also really loved the, like, pirate bounty hunter, German Sparrow kind of timeline. That was great. But yeah, it's probably 2 or 3 is just fun. Anyway, oh, did you know baguettes rhymes with yes I did? Yes I did, Dylan. Jill asks, Beelzebub's Tales group to fall to sleep to. That's good. Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Thank you. This is an ASMR for you, I see. Now, back to catching fish in muddy waters. Let's go. In their cackle about what are called the mental and astral... he is taking shots at the Theosophists, for real. And still other such bodies which are supposed to be in man. Nevertheless, it is well adapted to throw light on the question we are now considering. So this is actually interesting. This is actually interesting because we know Gurdjieff talks about astral bodies and causal bodies, and so do the Theosophists and, you know, Rosicrucian schools and occult schools. But in Theosophy, they are assumed. Like, everyone has an astral body. Whereas Gurdjieff is like, nah, dog. An astral body is a luxury. A luxury. Barely anyone's got one for real. You've just got, like, what you've actually got isn't an astral body. What you've actually got is just a lunar kind of sheath, a coating. As you go on through life, you mechanically absorb certain things, and it just... these, like, untransformed impressions and desires creates this lunar body of desires, which functions like an astral body, but it's completely, it's basically made out of desires. So when you go to sleep at night, you're not conscious in your astral body. You're unconscious in a body of desires, and you just seek out your desires. Hence, I guess, wet dreams and guys who have weird experiences at night. You're controlled by the moon if you have a body of desires, for real. But if you have a proper astral body and you're conscious within your astral body at night, that's another story. So let's see what Gurdjieff says about this, direct from the man. A man as a whole, with all his separately concentrated and functioning localizations, that is to say, his formed and independently educated personalities, is almost exactly comparable to that organization for conveying a passenger, which consists of a carriage, a horse, and a coachman. Oh, okay, so he's getting that old Buddhist phrase, the old Buddhist example of the man as a carriage. Another guy asks, what's the difference between people that are able to astrally project without actual astral body and people who are able to also got the... yeah, so this is interesting. I don't know. I know there seems to be some weird thing where, I mean, and this is the other thing. If you crystallize an astral body in a life, but you don't complete the work, so you don't have, like, objective reason and a causal body, what happens? Like Gurdjieff says, you know, you perpetuate, but only for a while. But what would that person be like? In another life, they would be born like any other person, and they would know the things that, you know, their culture knows. But then they would have an astral body. So they would kind of... if they may go throughout their entire life not realizing it, but what happens when they, you know, go to a New Age workshop and something activates just by chance? You know, what happens then? So it's this kind of thing where, you know, we talk about the work and we do see ourselves as elitists and New Age people as having nothing. But it seems that in this world, there are just random people who just have, like, half crystallizations, or just... who knows from what? If it's a law of accidents or some kind of fate, they have something in them. And for whatever reason, they can just astrally project without, whether it's they have an astral body, but they don't have higher functioning or a causal body, or maybe they don't have an astral body, but for some reason they just find it easy to leave at night. It's almost like they're so basic that their desires actually don't kind of lull them and hypnotize them to sleep. And if they do astral practices and are conscious enough, they can kind of astrally project. It just seems like a thing. And it's really weird. And that's why I've mentioned in the past, it's like you can plot it on kind of like a bell curve of people who, in the astral projection community, some people just do an astral practice and they get it every time. Some people, no matter how hard they try, they only get a couple. And then there's kind of a group of people in the middle. And it's like the fact that the bell curve exists isn't what's significant. What's significant is, how do you go from one side to the other? That would be this. So astral projection isn't seen as a path in and of itself. It would be seen as a litmus test So it's not like, yeah, we're just going to astrally project and we're going to go to like other dimensions and investigate the astral world. It's like, it's more of a, you do the work and every so often try an astral practice, and if you're successful, that may mean that, you know, the work you've been doing is significant. That's how someone in the work would view these astral workings or astral practices. Theosophists, so I'm just reading chat now. But anyway, back to the carriage and the horse and the coachman and the person within the horse. Sorry, within the horse, within the carriage. Oh, oh Jesus. What am I thinking about? It must first of all be remarked that the difference between a real man and a pseudo-man, that is, between one who has his own eye and one who has not, is indicated in the analogy we have taken by the passenger sitting in the carriage. In the first case, that of the real man, the passenger is the owner of the carriage, and in the second case, he is simply the first chance passer-by, who, like the fare in a hackney carriage, is continuously being changed. That's very interesting. So most humans are like taxis. There is something inside them, but it just switches off every now and then. Whereas like a person who is a real man owns the vehicle, and they're both the driver and the passenger. Yeah. What is that? Another guy. Just concentrate, don't move your body, and you're gonna astrally project, little bro, trust me. Has an astral body in his past life, yeah. Yeah, something like that, something like that. I mean, look, and this is the thing, it's like, some people have, like, weird experiences that you listen to and it's like, oh, that's actually kind of, like, legit. Like, they have no occult knowledge or leanings, and they have a legit, amazing experience. But at the same time, it's like, what does that experience do for them? Where do they go with that? It just... It's almost the same as drugs, as they just have a weird experience that they crystallizes in their memory and they just reference it from then on. It's like all of these experiences should be, you know, kind of fuel, or, you know, fuel for greater works or motivation for greater works. The point isn't to just have weird experiences. The point is to create a qualitative change so that I'm actually different. The body of a man with all its motor reflex manifestations corresponding simply to the carriage itself, all the functionings and manifestations of feeling, a man corresponds to the horse. Okay, so your motor cylinder is the carriage proper. Your feelings is the horse. So your feelings, your motivations is the horse. So if you can have a carriage that's really strong and developed, but if you don't have proper motivation, it doesn't move anywhere or go anywhere. Okay, this makes sense. To the carriage, the coachman sitting on the box and directing the horse corresponds to that in a man, which people call consciousness or mentation. Mentation, so that's the intellectual cylinder. And finally, the passenger seated in the carriage and commanding the coachman is that which we call I. The fundamental evil among contemporary people is that chiefly that owing to the rooted and widespread abnormal methods of education of the rising generation, this fourth personality, which should be present in everybody on reaching the reasonable age, is entirely missing in them. So most people are just, the wheel's turning, but the hamster's not there. That's what most people are. And almost all of them consist only of the three enumerated parts. So some people are educated and their bodies are developed, and sometimes, you know, they get that emotional part of them developed, they get the intellect is... I mean, nowadays, not even that, just the coachman is developed and we kind of plod along and hopefully get things right. Dylan, $5, thank you very much. What can you do as a minister of the fourth way? There are no ministers. The fourth way isn't a church, so prayer, blessing, trance, dance, magic spells, talents, and ability. But yeah, it's not a church, so those aren't. There's no deacons, there's no priests, there's no friars of the fourth way. The fourth way's just got dudes, The fourth way is hopefully got men 1 and 2 and 3 who are trying to become the fourth men, the balanced men. And a balanced man, you can tell a balanced man because they have no problems. Or more precisely, one tell is a man who, maybe it's not that they have no problems, but it's that they're always in a position to solve their problems. They have a solution. The fourth man or woman is basically, you know, someone who can solve potentially anything. Most people, it's like if you're a man number 1, you solve everything with your body. So if you have an intellectual problem, you're kind of screwed. Intellectual people solve things by thinking about it and trying to plan, and, you know, 5 months later, they're still thinking about it. I mean, if doing math and taxes is what they need to do, they're great, but with other things, not so much. And emotional people try to solve it with their emotions. Relationships, maybe they're great with, or maybe they're bad, but even... It's like emotional people, even if they're in a bad relationship, they're still good at giving advice to other people. It's kind of crazy. But it's like a balanced man is someone who has all three. So whatever problem comes their way, they can just solve it. So a fourth man has no problems. That is the tell of a fourth man. And I mean, that's a kind of an exterior way. For more internal phenomenological thing for yourself is, a fourth man is really someone who, you know, the fifth man has an astral body and permanent access to the higher emotional cylinder. A fourth man doesn't have permanent access to it, but there should be some flashes of, you know, higher functioning. They should have a kind of almost a concept of higher functioning, an experience of it every now and then. Flashes of awakening. They're not necessarily awake, but they have flashes of awakening. Now, which parts, moreover, are formed arbitrarily of themselves and anywho? How? In other words, almost every contemporary man of responsible age consists of nothing more or less than simply a hackney carriage, and one moreover composed as follows: a broken down carriage, which has long ago seen its day, a crock of a horse, and on the box a tattered demillion. Whoa, is this an old slur? Geez, these birds outside my window getting crunk. A tattered or dilapidated. A person in tattered clothing. Lamau. So most people, it's not just that they lack a permanent center of gravity. It's that their bodies are completely shot. Their horses are, you know, completely, you know, brain and left and, you know, underdeveloped, haven't been fed in a while. And even the coach driver is just like wearing tatters. So it's like, you know, intellectually developing yourself isn't, you know, going to bring a permanent center of gravity. You know, emotionally developing yourself isn't going to bring a permanent center of gravity. You know, working on the carriage, working on your body isn't going to bring a permanent center of gravity. But not having those things developed at all is definitely going... You will not have a permanent center of gravity. You need to have those things developed and then call to the permanent I. Yeah, a half... Yes, he's a tattered clothes and he's half sleepy, half drunken coachman whose time designated by Mother Nature for self-perfection passes while he waits on a corner. Oof. Fantastically daydreaming for any old chance passerby. The first passerby who happens along hires him and dismisses him just as he pleases. And not only him, but also all the parts subordinate to him. Birds, isn't it midnight? Maybe where you are. Continuing this analogy between a typical contemporary man with his thoughts, feelings, and baudet, and a hackney carriage, horse, and coachman, we can clearly see that in each of the parts composing both organizations, there must have been formed there must exist its own separate needs, habits, tastes, and so on, proper to it alone, from the varied nature of their arising, and the diverse conditions of their formation. And according to their varying possibilities in each of them, there must inevitably have been formed, for instance, its own psyche, its own notions, its own subjective supports, its own viewpoints, and so on. The whole totality. And so this is interesting because you can also understand that there are some people who have some kind of understanding of this. You need to have these three things developed and then a permanent I. You can kind of see how some people would just develop the body and then try to gain a permanent I, but they still lack, they still lack emotional development and intellectual development. Or maybe they're a gym bro who does gym stuff and then they read Stoicism, but then there's still something emotionally lacking there and they can never quite keep a relationship together. It's like, that's a red flag. Or maybe it's the intellectual, the person who's, developed themselves intellectually and they can have a relationship, but they're, a thin twig and they, never move a day in their life. And it's kind of like, there's something wrong there. There's something wrong there. The whole totality of the manifestations of human mentation, with all the inherences proper to this functioning, and with all its specific particularities, corresponds almost exactly in every respect to the essence and manifestations of a typical hired coachman. Like all hired coachmen in general, he is a type called cabby. He is not entirely illiterate because, owing to the regulations existing in his country for the general compulsory teaching of the 3 R's, the 3 hard R's, he was obliged in his childhood to put in an occasional attendance at what is called the parish church. Although he himself is from the country and has remained as ignorant as his fellow rustics, yet rubbing shoulders owing to his profession with people of various positions and education, picking up from them, by bits here and bits there, a variety of expressions embodying various notions. He has now come to regard everything smacking of the country with superiority and contempt, indignantly dismissing it all as ignorance. Okay, hold on a second. Although he himself is from the country and has remained as ignorant as his fellow, he rubbing shoulders with his own profession. Okay, so owing to his profession, he rubs shoulders with people of various positions and education, and he picks up from them bits and... Okay. So this is interesting. This is the kind of half-educated... This is the educated ignoramus. The guy who has some education, and then because he's met a variety of people and he has bits and pieces from everywhere, he kind of deceives himself into thinking he knows everything. I getcha. I know the guy. In short, this is a type to whomst applies perfectly the definition, the crows he raced, but by peacocks outpaced. Hey, that's funny. That's interesting. Touching shoulder tips. Thank you, Dylan. Make me laugh. That's a good, that's a very interesting saying. He raced the crows. In other words, crows are intelligent people. So he raced against crows, and that kind of gives him clout. But by peacocks, he was outplaced. So even by dum-dums, he still gets taken out. It's like going to like a boxing tournament and getting beaten by everybody, and then thinking you're better than other people. Because you've been to like a tournament or something, but you came last, bro. Shut the hell up. Yeah, peacock's dumb, crow's smart. And even though he's raced with crows, he still gets outpaced by peacocks. It's like going to a Harvard, but then failing every class, and then being like, yeah, man, I went to Harvard, shut up. And it's like, yeah, but you dropped out, bro, shut up. This is the guy. He considers himself competent, even in questions of religion, politics, and sociology. With his equals, he likes to argue, and those whomst he regards as his inferiors, he likes to teach. So the man who knows half the facts teaching the person who knows none of the facts. His superiors he flatters. With them he is servile. Before them, as I said, he stands cap in hand. My lord, my lord. One of his chief weaknesses is to dangle after the neighbouring cooks and housemaids, but best of all, he likes a good hearty tuck-in, and to gulp down another glass or two, and then fully satiated drowsily to daydream. Kimberly says, I know this guy. Yeah, me too, Kimberly. I know this guy. I've met a couple of this guy, if you know what I mean. To gratify. It's interesting, you know, this is a cabbie driver from what, like the 1900s, but it's like he's still around. Even in 2025, this guy is still around. Funny that. To gratify these weaknesses of his, he always steals a part of the money given him by his employer to buy fodder for the horse. Like every cabbie, he works, as is said, always under the lash. And if occasionally he does a job without being made, it is only in the hope of receiving tips. The desire for tips. I just want to like get this on a shirt. The desire for tips, Gurdjieff, has gradually taught him to be aware of certain weaknesses. Oh baby, we all have the desire for tips. And in the people with whomst he has dealings, and to profit himself by them, he has automatically learned to be cunning, to flatter, so to say, to stroke people the right way. Stroking those tips, baby. Stroking for tips. Stroking for tips, and in general, to lie. On every convenient occasion and at every free moment, he slips, oh I bet he does, into a saloon or to a bar, where over a glass of beer he daydreams for hours at a time, or talks with a type like himself, or just reads the paper, i.e. doom scrolls. He tries to appear... You see, boomers reading the paper is basically millennials doom scrolling. That's all it is. He tries to appear imposing, wears a beard, and if he is a thin pads... Imposing, wears a beard, and if he is thin pads himself... What is it? Thin pads, is that a phrase? Out to appear more important. Okay. Okay. The totality of the manifestations, of the feeling localization in a man, and the whole system of its functioning correspond perfectly to the horse of the hackney carriage in our analogy. Incidentally, this comparison of the horse with the organization of human feeling will serve to show up particularly clearly the error and one-sidedness of the contemporary education of the rising generation. The horse as a whole, owing to the negligence of those around it during its early years and to its constant solitude, is as if locked up within itself, that is to say, its so to say inner life is driven inside for external manifestations. It has nothing but inertia. So nothing arrives from inwards to out. It's simply strung via a carrot on a stick. It has no real inner motivation. If it does desire, if a person desires to become famous or to play the guitar, it's only because he saw someone else playing it and like getting girls or something. He was like, yeah, I need to play. There is no desire within him that arises from himself. It is all inertia that arises from an external manifestation. Thanks to the abnormal conditions around it, the horse has never received any special education, but has been molded exclusively under the influence of constant thrashings and vile abuse. It is molded by constant flaming and trolls on the internet and Twitter. It has always been kept tied up, And for food, instead of oats and hay, there is given to it merely straw, which is utterly worthless for its real needs. Never having seen in any of the manifestations toward it even the least love or friendliness, the horse is now ready to surrender itself completely to anybody who gives it the slightest caress. Yeah, that's emotionally, undeveloped people. Then getting into relationships just off the cuff. The consequence of all this is that all the inclinations of the horse, deprived of all interests and aspirations, must inevitably be concentrated on food, drink, and the automatic yearning towards the opposite sex. Hence it invariably veers in the direction where it can obtain any of these. If, for example, it catches sight of a place where even once or twice it gratified one of the enumerated needs, it waits the chance to run off in that direction. Gooners, exactly. So it's like they goon at work once, and then that just opens the door, and then every lunch break, or even like, even they just take breaks just randomly. I just gotta go to the toilet, and they just start gooning. Oh, good lord. It's almost like a guy who bar hops, but then at one bar he picks up a girl, or just happens to, get lucky, and then he always gravitates back to that bar specifically. I mean, I know, is the club scene kind of dead nowadays? Dead post-COVID, baby. Unless you're at a TikTok Riz party, it's all dead. It must further be added that although the coachman has a very feeble understanding of his duties, he can nevertheless, even though only a little, think logically. And remembering tomorrow, he either, from fear of losing his job or from the desire of receiving a reward, does occasionally evince an interest in doing something or other for his employer, without being driven to it. But the horse, in consequence of their not having been formed in it at the proper time, owing to the absence of any special and corresponding education, any data at all for manifesting the aspirations requisite for a responsible existence, of course fails to understand, and indeed it cannot be expected that it should understand why in general it must do anything. Its obligations are therefore carried out quite inertly, and only from fear of further beatings. Only motivated, it can't be motivated by anything but fear. Or consequence. These are the people who will break every law unless they're punished, and even then. They can't just do things correctly. As far as the carriage or cart is concerned, which stands in our analogy for the body, without any of the other independently formed parts of the common presence of a man, the situation is even worse. What is beating the horse equivalent to? Asks another guy. Beating the so he. It seems that he's saying that is equivalent to motivation only inspired by fear, basically. Like some kids are great. They're well behaved and they just sit in the corner great. And then some kids just like always misbehave. And it's like, even if you say, I'm going to give you a candy bar if you do this, they still don't do it. It's like only through fear do they learn. That's probably a bad analogy, but it's something like that. So now we're talking about the cart now. It was designed, as is evident, to every sane thinking man to carry all kinds of burdens, and not for the purpose of which contemporary people employ it, that is, only for carrying passengers. The chief cause for the various misunderstandings connected with it springs from the fact that those who made the system of this cart intended it for travel on the byroads, and certain inner details of its general construction were in consequence foreseemingly made to answer to this aim. That's interesting. I wonder what he's going to say about this. Because he's basically saying your body was made to take loads that we don't take anymore in modern society. And that's a bad thing. You need to take loads that you're not used to taking. Gurdjieff. Quote. For example, the principle of its greasing, one of the chief needs of a construction of such different materials, was so devised that the grease should spread all over the metallic parts, from the shaking received from the jolts inevitable on such roads, whereas now this cart that was designed for travelling on the by-roads finds itself stationed on a rank in the city and travelling on smooth, level, asphalted roads. In the absence of any shocks whatsoever, while going along such roads, no uniform greasing of all its parts occurs, and some of them consequently must inevitably rust and cease to fulfill the actions intended for them. This is interesting. So he's saying here, normally the carts would go over bumpy ground, and so they'd be constantly greased, so that the joints could take the bumps and, you know, still function correctly. But on the roads that it runs now, it's no longer bumpy, and so it doesn't get greased. And because it doesn't get greased, it rusts early. And so it's almost like he's saying, you know, in modern times we're too cushioned. Our bodies are too cushioned. And they don't do the things, it doesn't move in the way it used to. And so instead of being damaged, we get rust. And we think we're healthy, but our bodies are actually rusting from the inside out. That's interesting. A cart goes easily as a rule if its moving parts are properly greased. With too little grease, these parts get heated and finally red hot, and thus the other parts get spoiled. On the other hand, if in some parts there is too much grease, the general movement of the cart is impaired, and in either case, it becomes more difficult for the horse to draw it. Very interesting. Yeah, this could be some kind of commentary on a sedentary lifestyle, or even that our lifestyle, because it said that, you know, grease is placed too much in some cases. Like, you know, going to the gym and going all out and then going home and just crashing maybe isn't the way to do it. And maybe it is having some kind of functioning over the day for longer periods, like less weight, more reps, or I don't know, something like that. Let's see what he's saying. Let's continue seeing what he's saying. The contemporary coachman, our cabbie, neither knows nor has any suspicion of the necessity of greasing the cart. And even if he does grease it, he does so without proper knowledge, and only on hearsay, blindly following the directions of the first comer. Yes, yes indeed. That is why it's almost like, you know, someone who doesn't do anything healthy and then they watch, you know, one thing on Instagram and it's like, I gotta buy these vitamins, bro. They're like miracle cure vitamins, bro. Trust me, bro. I know what I'm talking about. And it's like, and it's like, you just saw one reel on TikTok by a health influencer and now you're just buying pills without really knowing what's in them. What are you doing? Like, this is the modern equivalent, I think, of what he's talking about here. This is why when this cart, now adapted more or less for travel on smooth roads, has for some reason or other to go along a by-road, something always happens to it. Either a nut gives way, I bet it does, or a bolt gets bent, or something or other gets loose. Yeah, so then when we take on what we're supposed to be able to take on, it damages us, and we're like, oh, I guess I'm just not meant to do it. And it's like, nah, bruh, nah. Manual laborers are always healthy. Exactly. Have you seen that? I think it's been going around. It's like that one. I think it's like a TikTok or an Instagram reel where some bodybuilders went to Africa or something, or they're in some place where, you know, there's hard laborers and they're all like kind of skinny black guys, but the two like fitness influencers are these jacked like white guys, like absolute like coke machines with legs, like their biceps are bigger than my thigh. And they go to this like labor town, the small town where there's these laborers, And what does he get? They get like a wheelbarrow and they fill it with bags of like cement or something. And they try to lift the wheelbarrow and move it along. And the guys with the jacked muscles can barely lift it. And if they can lift it, they can't move it forward properly without it tipping. So it's like, you know, you got to lift and balance and do all these things. And then it's just like one of the townsfolk who's just like a skinny, like scrawny kind of this, you know, black guy just kind of like lifts it up easily and just starts walking with it. And it's like, God damn. Exactly. That's the problem. This is the problem. Balance, probably not too muscular, but also not a twig. Yeah, exactly. You need a body like, you know, it's like an anime protagonist from Jujutsu Kaisen. That is people don't want to people hate me for speaking the truth, but it's like that's actually peak male performance. Reminds me that in Neigong they also promote this. Exactly another guy. Songbird. Dylan, you do manual labor. Good. Hey, Adamu, welcome to the chat. And so, my boy, what did you miss? We're just talking about, Gurdjieff is talking about man as a coach carriage, and he's breaking it down. So, like, the driver is the intellect. And he's basically, in most people, it's just a drunken kind of vagabond who thinks he knows everything. The horse is your emotional cylinder, and in most people it's just this like deprived horse that doesn't have any inner motivation and can only be motivated by external means. And now we're getting through the carriage itself, which is the physical body. And we're talking about the nuts and bolts of it all. So, when the carriage does go onto the by-roads, you get nuts flying everywhere. Nuts just fly everywhere, and bolts get bent. Or something other gets loose. And after these attempts at travelling along such roads, the journey rarely ends without more or less considerable repairs. In any case... D's nuts, am I right? Yes, Adamu. Exactly. In any case... To make use of this cart for the purposes for which it was made is already impossible without risk. If repairs are begun, it is necessary to take the cart all to pieces, examine all its parts, and all is done in such cases, kerosene them, clean them, and put them together again. And frequently it becomes clearly necessary immediately and without fail to change a part. This is all very well if it happens to be an inexpensive part, but it may turn out to be more costly than a new cart. I guess in modern terms, everyone, like, you know, talks about bodybuilding and getting jacked and all of that stuff, but I guess the best modern bodybuilding or developing the body would be something like gymnastics, because there you would be getting strength, but it would be a functional strength. Doing gymnastics and being able to kind of, you know, hold yourself up on some rings or some bars, do flips, that kind of thing. Just doing calisthenics and gymnastics is the true esoteric, and I guess a martial art to make sure that your strength is functional. So gymnastics, calisthenics, wrestling, judo, let's go. That's how to do the fourth way. Let's go, boys. You climb tree? Actually, climbing as well. Climbing trees, doing rock climbing, indoor climbing, that would also be legit as well, for real. And so, all that has been said about the separate parts of that organization, of which taken as a whole, a hackney carriage consists, can be fully applied also to the general organization of the common presences of man. Owing to the absence among contemporary people of any knowledge and ability specially to prepare in corresponding way the rising generation for responsible existence by educating all the separate parts composing their common presences, every person of today is a confused and extremely ludicrous something, That is to say, again, using this example, we have taken something resembling the following picture. That was a paragraph in the whole. Another guy asks, will calisthenics, gymnastics plus judo allow me to separate someone's astral body from their body like that one Baldy in Doctor Strange? I think, like, if you do that, you'll get so strong that when you, like, flip them onto concrete, that's basically what will happen. Basically. Not via, like, a touch, but you gotta, like, flip them really hard, and you slam their physical body so hard that their astral body just continues and descends into the surface of the earth. That's why people go subconscious when you judo flip them. They slam so hard into the ground. It's not that their brain rattles, it's that you shock their astral body out of their physical body, and it goes into the earth for, like, a couple of minutes. A carriage just out of the factory, made on the latest model, polished by genuine German craftsmen. So even back in the day, Germans were still the best. From the town of Barmen, lol, and harnessed to the kind of horse which is called in the locality named Transcaucasia a DGL. How would you pronounce that? Duglo Zid. So it's a Duglo. I think this is all one. Duglo Zidzi. Bam. Got that. That was perfect. Duglo Zidzi. Let's go. That is going to be the name of the power system in a fantasy novel that I write. Just these words are so crazy, bro. So crazy. Z is a horse. Duglos is the name of a certain Armenian specialist in buying utterly worthless horses and skinning them. Okay. Wow. Oh, Pragmagic says, just wanted to say I've much appreciated these streams. Thank you, Prag. Thank you. On the box of this stylish carriage sits an unshaven, unkempt, sleepy coachman cabbie, dressed in a shabby cloak, which he has retrieved from the rubbish heap where it had been thrown, as utterly worthless by the kitchen maid Maggie. Maggie is such a kitchen maid name, isn't it? R.I.P. women named Maggie. Oh, wow. Yeah, back in the day, Germans were still the best. Beelzebub was released in 1950. On his head reposes... Let's not complete that thought. Reposes a brand new top hat, an exact replica of a Rockefeller's, and in his, for a second there I thought that said butthole, but it says buttonhole, there is, I've been on the internet too long, there is a giant chrysanthemum. This picture, however ludicrous, of contemporary man is an inevitable result, chiefly because from the first day, a rising and formation of a contemporary man. So that's like the college kid, fresh out of college, looks all shiny, got a shiny carriage because he's young and youthful, spry and hip. You know, he's got the latest top hat on, which is just all of the intellectualism he's been given from his uni. But really, his intellect is just covered with this shabby cloak from bits and pieces he's gotten from places. You know, he's got a chrysanthemum on his button, he's got his uni degree. The contemporary man, all of these parts formed in him, which parts, although diversely caused and with properties of diverse quality, should nevertheless, at the period of his responsible existence for pursuing a single aim, altogether represent his entire whole being, so to say, to live and to become fixed in their specific manifestations separately, one from another. Yeah, life hasn't hit him yet. Never having been trained either to the requisite automatic reciprocal maintenance, reciprocal assistance, or to any even though only approximate reciprocal understanding, and thus, whence afterward, concerted manifestations are required. These concerted manifestations do not appear. No initiative whatsoever. As soon as they finish what they're told to do, they're just on their phone. Thanks, or you know, they get into a management position, but then they get a call after 6, but that's my time to clock off, so I'm not going to take a call after 6. You're in a management position, bro. You need to manage people. Thanks to what is called the system of education of the rising generation, it hasn't been fixed, Gurdjieff, it hasn't been fixed, which at the present time has already been completely fixed in the life of man, and which consists singly and solely in training the pupils by means of constant repetition to the point of madness, to sense various almost empty words and expressions, and to recognize only by the difference in their consonants the reality supposed to be signified by these words and expressions. The coachman is still able to explain, after a fashion, the various desires arising in him, but only to types similar to his own outside of his common presence. And he is sometimes even able approximately to understand others. Ooh, okay. So he's sometimes able to kind of understand other people. But not really. The coachman cabbie avows, this coachman cabbie avows, gossiping with other coachmen while waiting for a fare, and sometimes, as is said, flirting at the gate with the neighbor's maid, even learns various forms of what is called savoir-vivre. So he gets a little bit of aura every now and then. What does savoir-vivre mean? Is this just French for aura? Knowing how to live. Knowing how to behave. Ability to live elegantly. Okay, so it's kind of... I wouldn't say it's aura. I would say it's kind of makes him look like he's got his shit togetherness. Look like a gentleman, but really polishing a turd. It looks gold on the outside, but on the inside it's, stinky. He always, by the way, according to the external conditions of life of the coachman in general, gradually automatizes himself to distinguish one street from the other, and to calculate, for instance, during repairs in some street, how to get to the required street from another direction. So he may get good at his job, but only in an automatic way. But as for the horse, although the maleficent invention of contemporary people, which is called education, does not extend over the horse's formation. So the education is all for our intellect, and the horse, our emotions aren't developed properly. We aren't taught to motivate ourselves, really. And in consequence of its inherent possibilities are not atrophied, yet owing to the fact that this formation proceeds under the conditions of the abnormally established process of the ordinary existence of people, and that the horse grows up ignored like an orphan by everybody. And moreover, an ill-treated orphan, it neither acquires anything corresponding to the established psyche of the coachman, nor learns anything of what he knows, and hence is quite ignorant of all the forms of reciprocal relationships which have become useful for the coachman, and no contact is established between them for understanding each other. So this is interesting. His emotions develop completely separate from his intellect. So he may know certain things about relationships and how to relate to people, but when he's in an actual relationship, he's literally the worst partner ever. Very interesting. Kind of, you know, like Lord Byron, if you ever like read Lord Byron's life, he's like this amazing emotional person, like, you know, he makes amazing poetry, but like if you ever like, and he has all these lovers that think highly of him, but whenever he gets married, he's like literally the worst husband in the entire world, and he's like the shittest dad as well. Like, insanely bad husband. Amazing lover, insanely bad husband. There's something there, it's interesting, there's bifurcation. In modern people, this is what creates this dual personality. This over-education of the intellect, and the lack of that education doesn't reach their emotions. Very interesting. It is possible, however, that in its locked-in life, the horse does nevertheless learn some form of relationship with the coachman, and that even perhaps it is familiar with some language. But the trouble is that the coachman does not know this, and does not even suspect its possibilities. Apart from the fact that, owing to the said abnormal conditions, no data for even an approximate understanding of each other are formed between the horse and the coachman, and there are also still other and numerous external causes, independent of them, which fail to give them the possibility of together actualizing that one purpose for which they were both destined. So even though there may be some development in some people, there's still this divide. So even if the horse does get a little development, it's like the other way now. The emotional development doesn't reach the intellectual person, and they just think that they're bad, or they may think that they... That's interesting. What would it be? It's like a person who thinks they're bad at relationships, or they'd be a bad partner but they'd actually be good, or like maybe like a guy who's like, I'd be a terrible father, but they're actually... You look at them and be like, nah, you'd make a good dad, or something like that. But nonetheless, it's he's just basically going hard in the creation of this dual personality. And the problem with that is because there's something not synced between the coachman and the horse, this prevents them from actualizing actually what they were destined to do. The point is that just as the separate independent parts of a hackney are connected, namely the carriage to the horse, by the shafts, I bet there's a shaft, and the horse to the coachman by the reins, so also are the separate parts of the general organization of man connected with each other. And so this is interesting. So this is deep. This is hashtag deep. Because what are we talking about here? We're talking about the horse and the carriage as a unity. And sometimes someone can have a development in one part or another. But it's not just about developing, you know, the coachman and the coach and the horse. You also need to make sure that these parts are connected. Because it's like, what if there's like a, you know, you've developed, you know, your body and you've developed your emotion, but the shaft that connects the horse to the body isn't there. And so even though you have a certain emotional development, you know, you can, maybe you play music or you do art, and, you know, you also do martial arts, you've also developed your body in a certain way, there's something missing there, and you constantly lack motivation, and you constantly, if you don't train martial arts outside, it's like you only do it in groups. You can only motivate yourself to go to do yoga if you go to the yoga studio. You only are motivated to do art if there's a deadline. It's like the shaft is missing. And it's the same thing for the coachman and the horse then, between the reins. So you may have developed your intellect and your emotions, but if the reins aren't there, you know, the horse can't translate its motions to the intellect. And so you may go off on different tangents or you may go in different directions and you may not be realizing it. Or intellectually you may be able to develop certain things. The shaft is missing, Richard Ruach, 2025, exactly. Or intellectually you may be able to develop something. You may have quite a developed intellect, but without the reins, without that connection to the horse, You don't have the motivation to put it down to pen and paper and, you know the guy who's like, I'm going to write a story, and then it like, the book that they're going to write always exists in the library of tomorrow. I find it hard to imagine that someone that has built some development mainly in the body has lack of motivation for will. So think of it like someone who develops their body for a specific purpose, and then once they get there, it kind of like they let go. Like even think of kids that do sports because their dad did it. So like they did wrestling because their dad was wrestling champ, or only because their dad was a wrestling champ, or baseball because only their dad was a baseball player. It's like, there's a difference between, Tyson Fury, who got up at 3 a.m. and he was poor and he had to make his, work double shifts just to afford to go to the gym, and Tyson Fury's son, who is like, lives in, his dad's a millionaire, so he lives in a cushy like life, and he just has a kind of a home gym and kind of things like, yeah, and it takes motivation, but if he wants to be world champ like his dad, it's almost like there's something there that's not going to be quite as developed like his dad. That's an extreme example. You know what I'm trying to say? This is also how I'm cognizing it myself. I may be completely wrong and missing what Gurdjieff is saying, but it's an interesting... This is something here that's interesting. There's something interesting, because it really also shows the difficulty of the work, and also why we may get stuck at certain points in our own work. Because we may be doing a practice, we may be developing ourselves in a certain way, and it's like, you're working, and it's like, why isn't it happening? Why isn't this working? And it's like, because there's another part of you that you're neglecting, or there's two things that need to come together. This is like some hashtag deep stuff, man. For real. So also, are the separate parts of the general organization of man connected with each other? Namely, the body is connected to the feeling organization by the blood. Is Gurdjieff going to give us a method of communication with the subconscious, I wonder? Yeah, he does that. He's done that in the previously. I mean, in a way, the repetition and the style of this book is hypnotic. Gurdjieff was a hypnotherapist. But he recommends, like, really early on, just people honking their horns, he recommends really early on, when you wake up in the morning, to do like a retrospective of maybe like the night before, but like the day before. And this has an effect, because when you wake up, you're kind of, the door of the subconscious is a little bit still open. Reminded of the method of Huna. Who's Huna? Who's Huna? Explain, Adam. Explain. And while you're typing that in, I'll continue here. So the shaft that connects the coach to the horse in physically in us, the body to the emotional center is the blood. Blood is the shaft. Blood is in the shaft. The Hawaiian shaman. I haven't read that. I think I know what you're talking about, though. I'm pretty sure I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah. Hunadis. You son of a bitch. Anyway. And the feeling organization is connected to the organization of actualizing the functioning mentation or consciousness by what is called Handbladzoin, that is, by the substance which arises in the common presence of man from all intentionally made being efforts. So hold it, that's interesting. Remember, Handbladzoin is the blood of the astral body. So you start coagulating and creating and arising the blood of the astral body in you by struggling and making efforts. So that could be as simple as when you wake up in the morning and you have the tendency to look at your phone. If you realize you want to look at your phone, it's not that you just completely go, I will not look at my phone for the rest of the day, and that's like a struggle. It's just like, no, just leave it for 10 minutes without looking at my phone. Do something else. Do a little meditation. Go to the kitchen. Splash some water in your face, and then you go and look at your phone, kind of thing. It's like when you feel a mechanical impulse to do something, going against it. Like, you know, if you see the movie Revolver, it's like the guy... Actually, it will be the opposite of the movie Revolver. It's like, you know, you're going to take the elevator and then you just go, you know what? I'm going to take the stairs. It's just something, not that that crystallizes an astral body, but it's like you struggle against mechanical tendencies. Like just a little drop. You get a little drop, maybe. That's what he's alluding to. So we need to take more loads and make sure the shaft is working. Yes, Kimberly. Exactly. That is exactly what Gurdjieff is saying. But no. So the blood itself is the connector point between the emotional cylinder and the motor. The motor and the emotional cylinder is connected via the blood. And the feeling organization is connected to the organizing, actualizing, and functioning mentation or consciousness. So then your feeling is connected to the intellect. So someone whose mind and heart are really connected, who's really in sync with that, has a lot of surplus Handblazoin. That's interesting. So someone who's really connected heart and mind, even if they don't have occult knowledge, may have like a half an astral body. That's interesting. That's an interesting thing. That's hard. That's hard. So the wrong system of education existing at the present time has led to the coachman ceasing to have any effect whatsoever on his horse, unless we allow the fact that he is merely able, by means of the reins, to engender in the consciousness of the horse just 3 ideas: right, left, and stop. Very interesting. Very interesting. Strictly speaking, he cannot always do even this, because the reins in general are made of materials that react to various atmospheric phenomena. For example, during a pouring rain, they swell and lengthen, and in the heat the contrary. Okay. Thereby changing their effect upon the horse's automatized sensitiveness of perception. Very interesting. Very interesting. So cosmic forces affect our Handblazoin, which can affect the way our heart and mind interact with each other. So without a properly crystallized astral body, we are very influenced by the planets. But with a crystallized astral body, planetary influences cease to affect us like normal people. Very interesting. Pee-pee big. Pee-pee in the brain. Hard. You know what I mean? The same proceeds in general. The same proceeds in the general organization of the average man whenever from some impression or other, the, so to say, density and tempo of the Handblazoin changes in him, when his thoughts entirely lose all possibility of affecting his feeling organization. And so, to resume all that has been said, one must willy-nilly acknowledge that every man should strive to have his own eye. Otherwise, he will always represent a hackney carriage, in which any fare can sit, and which any fare can dispose of just as he pleases. So you will always be able to be manipulated, unless you will always... that car. You will always be able to be manipulated and controlled, if not by politicians, by the whims and accidents of the planetary forces. And although you have freedom, it's like even the motivation to do the thing that you want to do may be manipulated out of you via the planetary forces and whatnot. Different planetary forces will affect your Handblazoin, which will affect that communication. And so you may, even though you want to do something, you may not have the force to do it. Very interesting. Your mama, planetary force. Yes. Oh, the Cimarron in chat says, I hear Kabbalists say Israel has no sign, meaning there's no dominating astrological influence on those who struggle to attain union. Yeah. Yes. So if you're struggling, if you're trying to attain union, you're getting a surplus of Handbloodsone and you're crystallizing an astral body. If you have this astral body, you have something permanent. So then you're not just a cabbie driver. There's a permanent person within the carriage. It's not just being changed every time you stop to do something. You know what I mean? You know, you stop to have lunch, and then afterwards you have dessert, and then you see it's sunny outside, and you go, I should go for a walk. And then on the way to go for a walk, you're going to get your shoes, but then you see your phone. It's like, I should call, text my friend. And then because you open your phone, then the next person comes into you, and it's like, I should just browse Twitter real quick. And then you look out the window, and it's like, oh, it's nighttime. I need to go for it's evening. I need to go for my walk. And then the next person comes in. It's like, the desire, the thing within you is continuously replaced. You can hear my wife sneezing. Tyler, huh? Tyler says, bless you, honey. No. She's a little sick. Yes, exactly, Tyler. May be manipulated into experimental medical interventions. Exactly, exactly. Oh, shafting horses. God damn it, Adam. Now. And here, it will not be superfluous to point out that the Institute of the Harmonious Development of Man organizes on the systems of Mr. Gurdjieff has among its fundamental tasks also the task of, on the one hand, correspondingly educating its pupils, each of the enumerated independent personalities separately, as well as in their general reciprocal relationship. So it's not just that you train each thing individually. It's like you do wrestling, you do music, and you do philosophy to train all three parts. It's also the coming together of all of it. That's what the fourth way is. The communication between those parts. And on the other hand, of begetting and fostering in each of the pupils what every bearer of the name of man without quotation marks should have, his own eye. Damn, son. Becoming a fourth man and balanced man is really hard. For a more exact, so to say, scientific definition of the difference between a genuine man, that is, man as he ought to be, and a man whomst we have called man in quotation marks, that is, such men as almost all contemporary people have become, it is fitting to repeat what was said about this by Mr. Gurdjieff himself in one of his personal lecture talks. It was as follows. Now, we're getting close. Well, we still got 30-odd pages, but we're getting close to the end of today. So, I may end it there, because that's a good place to end it. May end there. So if you got questions, everybody in the chat, ask them now. If not, thank you so much. Thank you for the donations as well. Thank you for Mr. River King and Dylan, I believe. Yes. Yes. And yeah, we all gotta crystallize an astral body. So an overview of the crystallization, because he says so many things. One thing always to remember that I always want to mention with the crystallization of the astral body is the foundation of it is the exiohari, or the sexual forces. So there needs to be sexual substances within the sexual cylinder. So you can't be constantly gooning. The next thing is self-remembering, or the struggling to self-remember, because basically, there's all these things like Park Dog, Being Duty, and Otto Zilniker, but those are all present if you're self-remembering. And it seems, as well as self-remembering, but kind of pondering or cultivating a contemplation also does something, because not knowing things but understanding things creates a friction within us that releases sparks. That's also really interesting. And then, of course, struggling in life, struggling against your mechanicalness. So self-remembering, struggling against mechanicalness, and contemplating creates substances within us that crystallizes higher being bodies. Very interesting. Kimberly says, if he thinks people were effed up back then, imagine if he saw them now. Yeah, I know, right, bruh? I know. In Gurdjieff's cosmology, are the planets possible entities with consciousnesses, or are they just unconscious gigantic masses? So this is the interesting thing. Gurdjieff doesn't really talk about that, because he doesn't, and it's hard. Ouspensky makes the universe seem really mechanical, but I think that's just Ouspensky. But in essence, he talks about the cosmoses as being kind of living. Because it's like, you know, he didn't go through it in Beelzebub, he used different terms, but there's, in the Fourth Way, I swear they talk about, what do you call it, the protocosmos, iocosmos, macrocosmos, deutocosmos, mesocosmos, microcosmos, and tritocosmos. Tritocosmos being the moon, microcosmos being man, macrocosmos being the galaxy, and then there's universe and planets and solar systems. Those are all also levels of consciousness. So inherently in his system, there's an inherent kind of implication that the planets and solar systems and galaxies and the universe itself is conscious. But he doesn't kind of go into and because they're conscious, and you can do certain ceremonies and practices to maybe communicate with these things and ask for things and give offerings to them. He doesn't turn it into, you could turn this into a religion. He doesn't do that. He focuses, even, because that's another way, is the way of working with the macrocosmos so that the rays have an influence on the microcosmos, or there's the way of just focusing on the microcosmos and trying to change the internal microcosm via its own internal mechanics, which you still kind of need to learn about cosmology. But fundamentally, that's Gurdjieff is doing an internal alchemy. Exiohari. Yeah, sorry. Exiohari. How do you pronounce your name? The Cimarron asks, Exiohari? Yeah, Exiohari is sexual life force. It would, I guess, physically just be, you know, Exiohari is stored in the balls, literally. But basically, Gurdjieff says that's a fundamental, that's like the foundation of the higher being bodies. It requires Exiohari. So you can't be a guna and obtain higher being bodies. You need to transmute the Exiohari. Something I wanted to ask was, what exactly do you believe? From previous video, I thought it was more or less dual cultivation and alchemy, but then now Gurdjieff, there's Gurdjieff stuff. Yeah, so this is interesting. Dual cultivation, I learned from Ouspensky, well, I learned from a bunch of things, but Ouspensky, I internalized Spensky's hydrogen system. I need to do a video on this. I've done one on the second channel, Richard Ruach 2. You can see years ago, that was the first video I ever made, was Gurdjieff's hydrogen table explained, which is Ouspensky's hydrogen table, really. In that hydrogen table, so the Exiohari is hydrogen C12. There is an understanding that when you're working in an octave like musical notes. You see on a piano, pianos are made out of like 7 different octaves. And the notes, there's like, you know, enough for 7 different octaves. There's 52 piano keys. So it's like 49 piano keys for the 7 octaves, and I think there's like an extra 2 on the ends. But when you talk about musical notes and the tones, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, there are missing semitones. So the semitones are the black keys on the piano. And you know that there's not enough black keys for all the white keys, so there's some missing black keys. They're the missing semitones. So the whole thing is there is a missing octave. There's a missing semitone between the octaves. So your hydrogen C12 is Exiohari, and to get it to crystallize into a higher being body, how do you do that? There's 2 ways. One way is an external way, one way is an internal way. Well, one way is an external way. Why? And you can use the analogy of, what does an orange tree produce? Trick question, because people go, orange tree, I guess oranges, and you go, nope. Orange trees don't produce oranges. Orange trees produce flowers. Something external to orange trees come and basically pollinate the flowers and create the oranges. So an orange tree creates a flower, and that's their, the C12, that's where the octave ends. Something external outside of that comes and completes or goes to the next octave. So in humans, dual cultivation can create a higher being body. And I mean, it makes sense. You spill your sexual substance outwards and it creates a body. So if you transmute it internally and upwards, should also create a higher being body. It makes sense. But fundamentally, the way a hydrogen in an Ouspensky system works is if it's like the missing semitone, it just means that it needs another hydrogen of the same type to smash into it. So male has a hydrogen C12, female has hydrogen C12, you combine them both and boom, you got a higher being body. But within humans, you can create surplus hydrogen C12 via self-remembering, because impressions come into us via the density is of a 48. This is meaningless for people who don't know the hydrogen table. Dou 48, which goes to Me 24 and then a La 12. But in normal people, you get an impression, which is the density of a Dou of 48. The number is 48, that's the density. And the lower the number, the more refined it is. But in normal people, it doesn't transform. It just sits there, dead, as a hydrogen 48. Only in people that transform impressions does the hydrogen 48 turn into a hydrogen 12. And if you have a surplus hydrogen 12 and you haven't been gooning, hypothetically, it seems there's some kind of internal mechanism to create a higher being body. I don't know. Once again, maybe it's the Kali Yuga and that's unlikely and you have to do dual cultivation or whatever. But you need to take the teachings at face value. You need to let the teachings speak. And that seems to be something there. There does seem to be something here. Now, I mean, I'm going to need to end soon, so I can't go off on a huge freaking tangent, but I hope that kind of, anyway, that's how I'll answer that. Anyway, Songbird Dylan says, thanks for not banning you. No problem, Dylan. Would you say it's not about the effort, how much you meditate, but how coherent your awareness and the answers become? Yeah, in short, yes, but there's more to say about that. Cimarron also says again, the concept of Western esotericism, each planet has a logos. Yeah, you can practice to ask your father to... Yes, exactly. Ooh. Are you a Samaelian, the Cimarron? What if you don't have balls? Says Kimberly. Women store exiohari in the ovaries. Thank you, True Viking. Yes. Women also have exiohari. And better luck next time. Bro, Adabu, calm down. Jizz on a crystal ball. Jesus Christ. Boys. Oh, Jesus Christ. Just create your own. But anyway, Richard, what is key deviation? Do you have a dual cultivation furnace? You say, are you courting death? Well, we're all courting death, baby. Let's go. Key deviation is where you do energetic practices kind of improperly, and you kind of build and crystallize something in you, but the energy doesn't do right. And so what you have is kind of flashes or headaches. You know how people are like, oh, I'm meditating. You kind of get like this pressure, but you just meditate through it. And it's like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. You're going to give yourself a freaking like seizure or like something like that. But the problem is if that happens and you do it enough and you just kind of plow through it, whenever you try to meditate or do an internal practice, you close your eyes, immediately the headache comes. It's like, why? It's like you've laid down some train tracks, and now whenever you practice, you close your eyes and introvert, energy just flows in that direction because the train tracks are there. It's like, if you get key deviation, if you've kind of laid down the foundations wrong, you just need to like stop practicing for a while, for reals, or else, because you just need to let the train tracks dissolve. You need to let your progress dissolve. And it's not even like, oh, you crystallized wrong, you're Hannah Smooth. It's like, no, you crystallized wrong, you're gonna like give yourself a freaking aneurysm. Like, or seizure, or actually go... I know we joke about being schizos, but it's like you might actually go schizophrenic. Anyway, but yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'll call it there tonight. And I'll see y'all next week for the next one. We're getting close to the end. Maybe only one more, maybe only two more. Two more, maybe three more. Maybe four if we're lucky. And then we'll have some manly PP in our hall. Secret teachings of all ages, baby. Let's go. Anyway, thank you all for coming, and thank you for the donations. See y'all next time.